From me as well. Now that we all know where Cyprus is and how beautiful the country is, let me just say a few words about its asset management industry. The position, the strategic location of Cyprus, the progressive legal funds framework and the tax incentives that it offers an ideal portfolio of distribution opportunities and investment structurings for fund managers. And the fund manager can use Cyprus to attract investors from countries with which we have double tax treaties, and we have around about 60, as mentioned before, distribute investments in those 60 countries and invest in assets which, as mentioned before, the vast majority of which are completely tax-free in the hands of the fund. So Cyprus offers an ideal distribution opportunities for a fund manager. Asset management in Cyprus is regulated by three main pieces of legislation. The first one has to do with individual asset management, and it's the UCI law. It's the MiFID law, it's the transposition of the MiFID II directive, which took place in 2007. The second one is the Alternative Investment Funds Managers Law of 2013, which is a complete transposition of the EU directive, the so-called IFMD. The third one is the UCI law. It's a transposition of the UCITS IV directive, which took place in 2012, and it was updated to comply with the UCITS V directive last year, in April last year. It's worth mentioning that Cyprus is introducing a new law in an attempt to regulate fund management and to regulate fund managers who manage funds which are under the AUM, which are under the thresholds of the IFMD, which is 100 million euros with leverage and €500 million without leverage. This legislation, this coming legislation, is the so-called mini managers law, which I will explain later on. It seems that the only feasible way a fund manager to get an access into the European Union, a non-EU fund manager, is to either set up his own fund management company under the IFM law or cooperate with a platform, an IFM platform or a UCITS platform, under which some of the services, which I will explain later on, can be sub-delegated back to the fund manager. And this is because there is uncertainty as to the extension of the IFMD in third countries, as well as the expectation that the national private placement regimes which exist in the European Union will end and will expire by the end of 2019. So let's have a look at how a US fund manager can set up a fund management company in Cyprus, or how he can use an IFM platform operating in Cyprus. This is a typical structure of an IFM company, a Cypriot IFM company. There are basically three basic requirements to have such a company on the ground. The first one is that it must have a board of directors, at least two executive directors and two non-executive directors, the CVs of whom should be approved by SAISEC, our regulator. The second basic requirement is that such a company should have a senior manager board consisting of at least two people. It's the so-called 4I principle. And the third one is that this company should have at least two core functions, the so-called risk management functions and the portfolio management functions. Both heads of the risk management department and the portfolio management department should pass the relevant exams set by SAISEC. And it's important to note for the next slide that such a fund management company can outsource either portfolio management or risk management, but not both, because letterbox provisions do not apply in Cyprus. So you have such a company must have a substance, must have a registered office and a head office operating in Cyprus. The minimum share capital of such a company is 125,000 euros plus 0.02% on assets under management exceeding 250 million, and the maximum figure of 10 million is, this capital is capped at 10 million. So, the second alternative for our US fund manager is to collaborate with an IFM platform operating in the European Union and preferably in Cyprus, whereby the asset manager, the US asset manager, can come into an agreement with the platform, the IFM, or use its platform, whereby such a platform can outsource back portfolio management to the US fund manager. So what do we achieve in this case? We achieve that we have the US fund manager still sitting in his office in New York, managing his investments without having to go and get a base and set a base in the European Union. Of course, there are some restrictions and oversight requirements that the IFM, the platform, should have in place to get an oversight on the US fund manager. So our fund manager will still manage his Cayman fund, attracting US investors, and also through the platform he can attract European investors through the registration of a relevant AIF, which is set up in Cyprus to attract the EU investors. So all investors, either being US or EU, can invest in the same assets through two different vehicles, the Cayman Fund as well as the AIF, the European AIF or the Cyprus AIF. Of course, the AIF can be a limited partnership or a variable capital company, and it can also be a registered AIF going forward when the new legislation is passed. So the use of a platform is a very popular vehicle for a US fund manager to get a footing and distribute his funds in the European Union. Mini managers, as mentioned before, Cyprus will be introducing the mini managers law, which will attempt to regulate managers managing assets which are less than the thresholds of the IFMD. The benefit is that there are lower level of regulatory requirements, much lower than what is required by the regulated manager under the IFMD. And this change, we are expecting to see it coming into force in 2017. Passport of this manager is allowed, provided that it is approved by the country at which the fund manager wishes to distribute his investments. What does SAISEC look for when approving a fund? First of all, it looks at the appropriateness of the shareholders, full KYCs, the members of the board of directors based on the fit and proper test, based on their CVs, the portfolio manager and the risk manager who need to pass their exams, the SAISEC exams, compliance officer, internal operations manual, and anti-money laundering procedures manual. The registration process takes around about 4 months since application. Cyprus benefits, a lot of it has been mentioned regarding Cyprus benefits. I will not bore you to mention again the Cyprus benefits. I will only stand on a couple of them. The first one is the sort of cost structure. We have performed a study which shows that running a fund management company in Cyprus is a much more cost-effective than having to run a fund management company in Luxembourg or in any other European countries. The location, it has been mentioned, capabilities of staff, there is a necessary expertise. for staff to support the industry, the funds industry, and of course the existence of a modernized and progressive framework. And I want to stand on this point just to mention one or two things that we are doing in Cyprus to modernize our legal framework. The first one is what Andreas mentioned before, is the registered AIF notion, which will come into play in 2017, and this will definitely speed up the time for funds to come to the market, because you will not need to authorize the fund, but rather you will need to register the fund with SISEC, provided that the fund manager is a qualified fund manager. The second is the legal personality that we are now giving to the partnerships, which means that partnerships can own their investments instead of the general partner. And of course, the notion of the carried interest, which I will mention in a while. So let's have a look at some tax considerations for fund managers. A lot of it, again, it has been mentioned. I will not be long on that. Taxation is at 12.5%. Keris has mentioned the taxation. It applies to all fund managers as well. Dividends are not taxed. Profit on sale of securities are not taxed. And we do not impose any withholding taxes on foreign investors. There are no deemed dividend distributions, and funds, along with the rest of the companies, can enjoy the notional interest deduction for a period of 10 years. On a personal level, there is a progressive tax rate of 35%. However, our income tax law provides for the exception for the 50% for a period of 10 years. So effectively, income tax of a foreign fund manager is reduced by 50%. There is no taxation for interest and dividends received by tax residents but non-domiciled individuals. And something new which is coming is what I mentioned before. It's the notion of carried interest, which Cyprus is proposing to tax at the rate of 7% instead of at the personal tax rate, which is 35%. And this will apply for a period of 10 years by the time since the fund manager starts business on the island. Thank you very much for your attention. Any questions? We are happy to take them during the Q&A.
Okay, as mentioned before, in Cyprus now we have a very flexible regime with the efforts of various stakeholders, including and of course with the continuous support of the Ministry of Finance and especially Mr. Georgiadis. We have a very flexible regime, including all the options that all the established jurisdictions have, the legal option and the categories of fund. And the main message that we can pass today, especially for the US fund manager, is that Cyprus can be in jurisdiction of choice because of this legislation that we have, the favorable tax regime that we have for the fund and fund management company, the services, the high level of services that we have in Cyprus for so many years, and of course at a very competitive cost comparing to the other European jurisdiction, having at the same time the European passporting right attached to the fund and the fund management in Cyprus.
Thank you, Andrea. So I want to just develop on that, because I spoke at the beginning about the importance of stability in the financial services industry, and we're about to have a very big, let's say, development that actually has to do with instability and the effects of Brexit. How can Cyprus, and Christos, this is a question for you, how can Cyprus, let's say, approach this, benefit from this within the funds management industry?
Well, depending on the type of Brexit, because if there is a hard Brexit, meaning that UK fund managers are not entitled for the passport anymore, they will need to look elsewhere in the European Union to divert their passporting rights. And with the developments that we have in place and with the framework that we have in place at the moment, I think that Cyprus will play a big role in that, and we have a big role to play. In what sense? In two ways. I think that the first is by attracting UK fund managers who may not be able to offer and get to enjoy the passport rights anymore in the European Union, so they have to associate with another EU country which has the passport rights, and Cyprus, as mentioned before, does have the rights. And also the attraction of non-EU fund managers, excluding UK fund managers, who want to get a footing in the European Union or who may want to distribute their funds in the European Union. So Cyprus is very well placed in that. And of course, we are a young jurisdiction. We are not claiming that we are Luxembourg or Ireland. We are a young jurisdiction. But our framework doesn't have anything to feel jealous about the rest of the EU jurisdictions. Actually, since 2013, since the enactment of the IFM law, we have around about 16 fund management companies operating on the island. 4 of them are UCITS companies, and the rest of the companies, 12 companies, are either IFM platforms or a combination of IFM and UCITS. So there is a development going on the
concrete
island.
Prospects.
Yeah.
Very well. Very well.